What's up? Welcome. I am so glad you are here listening and spending time with me today. Release Your Inner Power talks about life, the trenches, the decisions, and the wins that we have now, today, and that have experienced in our past. There are stories, encouragement, tools, and tips to take those next steps to release that inner power and connect with something that is said or someone, a special guest maybe, that will boost your week. I am your host, Shauna B. Here we go. Welcome back to Release Your Inner Power podcast. I am so excited to share the special guest with you today. Her name is Allison. Welcome, Allison, to the show.
Thank you so much for having me here, Shauna. It's such an honor to be here.
I am so happy that you're here, and I'm so excited to have this conversation and get really into this. I think it would really help a lot of people, so I'm excited to have this conversation. Tell me about who Allison is and how she got to where she's at today.
Oh my goodness, what a beautiful question to start with. Thank you. Well, Allison, like most people, I am a work in progress. And I feel like as a mama and as a wife and as an entrepreneur and as a daughter, I always want to be a work in progress, right? Because I want to be growing and I want to be learning and I want to be changing in the ways that life has us change. And so formally, I am a family caregiving attorney and coach. And what that means is that I help women with their dreams and with their caregiving as it relates to caring for their children, caring for their parents, and thinking about what decisions need to be made to care for themselves.
Wow, that's so amazing. It's so amazing and so needed when you get into those situations sometimes, where sometimes it's unexpected and sometimes you can see it coming, but it's a lot. It's a lot and it's huge and it's big and it's so awesome that there is somebody that can help guide people or just help them bridge that gap of not really knowing, not really knowing where to start or what to do because it's so big. So that's amazing. I love that you do what you do. I think it's
Oh,
great.
thank you, Shauna. And what I love how you phrased it because you said sometimes you see it coming and sometimes you don't. And what I really feel like the mission is that God put in my heart is to say, let's all see it coming. Like the price of admission, if you are fortunate enough to have people in your life that you love, the price of admission is that at some point you will be a caregiver. And so if we start from that mindset, it's not a if, it's a when, then, as women, as the CEOs of our family, as the hearts of our community, we say like, all right, like let's prepare for that. So I love the concept of taking this thing that really I mean, if I could visualize every single woman's life that I know, caregiving would be there at some point in the future and say, here and circle it in red is going to be a super challenging time in your life. I know that because I'm a two-time cancer caregiver. I work with families in my law office and I work with families in coaching. And I've been in this field for nearly 20 years, personally and professionally. And so if I could just say, this big red circle, it's going to be hard. It's going to be the wilderness and challenge you in ways that are going to bring you to your knees and break you. But it doesn't have to be as hard as it could be. Like, I feel like that's one of my deepest passions and why I love what you do in your coaching, Shauna, is that I feel like you help women and you empower women to then move on to that next level of whatever they need or whatever their family needs.
Yeah. Yeah. I love how you said that. There's like this big red circle because there's going to be caregiving at some point in your life. And that is so important to remember. And I love how you said when. So like be ready for when it happens. So you're not caught. Like you're not caught like deer in the headlights, that kind of a scenario and situation. So I do love that. I want to back up a little bit. When you said that you are a two-time cancer caregiver, was so I know some of your story just because we've talked before. But you said that you were in like the law, like in being a lawyer, and then you moved into what you are doing now. Can you give me a little bit of a story of how that movement happened with you being a two-time cancer caregiver and how that changed your trajectory, if you will, of what you were doing?
Absolutely. So I still am a lawyer and I still practice here in New York City. I'm barred in New York and New Hampshire. So I still practice formally. But before I became a caregiver to my dad, I was in college just studying to be a lawyer. I mean, just doing an arts and sciences program, but with the concept that I really wanted to be a lawyer. And then upon his sickness and upon his death, one of the questions that the universe asks you is like, what do you stand for? Who are you? What do you really want? I mean, anybody who's experienced a death, I think in some way, and the voice is different, the intensity may be different, but there is a fundamental question, maybe among others, of like, who are you? What is your life about? And I said, I still want to be a lawyer. I still want to be a lawyer. I'd wanted to be a lawyer ever since I was 7. And so I'm like, I still want to be a lawyer. So I went to law school. And because my dad passed away after he was sick with cancer, and it was 6 months before I married my husband, I was like, I'm gonna do this. Like the universe, God said, who are you? And I said, this is who I am. So I'm gonna show up this way. So then I graduated law school, studied for the bar, and then 3 weeks into my first job at my dream law firm, I felt so just fortunate to be there for a myriad of reasons. I received a phone call from my mom's doctor, who, before she had even woken up from anesthesia, said, your mom is sick, you need to come back.
Hmm.
So, 3 weeks into my dream job of being a lawyer, which I had declared I was going to do, practice law after my dad's death, it was actually one of the things that I think kept me going. I couldn't do that anymore. I couldn't do it. And so I went home for a year. My mom at that point was a widow. I'm an only child. And I obviously just wasn't going to have her go through this alone. I mean, she has such an incredible community, but just the person day in and day out who's there with you. I wanted to be that person and I couldn't be that person and also do this job in Washington, D.C. So I went to her home and stayed with her for a year. Very thankfully, she's healthy. She was healthy then, she's healthy now. Her oncologist fired her a couple years ago because she'd had 10 years of clean scans. So, those are the kinds of things that we celebrate. But along the way, after I came back to the law firm, so a year later, after my mom's entire year of treatment, which was very tough just for everyone for a myriad of reasons, my firm was kind enough to hold my job. I still had my office. I came back, I started working, and I was different. And this job no longer fit. And I have to say, Shauna, that of all of the things in caregiving, this was one that I was completely unprepared for. As a former caregiver, what it looks like when you try to re-enter your life and your life is no longer what you thought it was. And so the things you had in place before caregiving that were very important to you no longer fit. Um, and that was just it was devastating for me, devastating.
Yeah, I bet you had this path that you saw and you kind of put a little hold button on there and to go be with your mom, which I love that. I love that you said I wanted to be the person there for her and to take care of her day in and day out. I think that that is awesome. And I'm sure was so the word that wants to come to me is precious for both of you to like have that time and to be, with each other during that hard time because I'm sure it was very challenging, but then to okay, now I'm going to take the steps that I was and all of that change and growth and things that had happened. It's just like, I bet it was very, I don't want to say enlightening because I think it was more intense than that, but it was probably awakening to you of like, whoa, like now what? Now what? Because I
Absolutely.
declared this path, right? I declared this path. This is who I am. I landed this thing what I'm so excited about. And I mean, I totally commend you too for being like, no, this is your dream job. And you're like, nope, this is going to be on hold because I need to do this. First of all, I want to commend you for that because I think that is wonderful and beautiful in so many ways. But then to come back to it when you now can, because your mom is doing so much better, which is so great, and to just have all this different, like, what did you do from there when you said it was devastating just because you had a plan and an expectation of where you were going to be, and now it's all different? How did you work through that to know what was next?
Hmm, that's such a beautiful question. So it's not that, and I think this is the case for many people, as many people that I work with. It's not that you don't know how to do it, right? It's not like you all of a sudden don't understand English when everyone's speaking English. It's just that English may not feel like the natural first language for you anymore. And so I could still do the work and I could tell that I was learning and I was growing, but I really just felt like I was not growing in the ways that I really not just wanted to, but after these two experiences in my life at critical times, like 6 months before my wedding, my dad died. And then 3 weeks into my first job, my mom, was diagnosed. At these critical times, I just wasn't growing and changing and heading in the direction I absolutely needed to. I needed to be free in a sense and free to pursue what comes next. And this role, even though I was so thankful for it, which was the dream fit role before, um, just wasn't the thing anymore. And so I gave it some time. I really feel, and why I don't even know where it comes from, but just the whole idea that you never make decisions on your best days and you never make decisions on your worst days. So I love the idea of not making decisions on worst days, but tracking it, having some sort of objective measure that you can look back on day after day or week after week to recognize what's actually going on. So I'm someone, Shauna, with big feelings. I have lots of emotions. And I have found that if I don't have some sort of measurement that matches with me, that allows me to articulate in a way what I'm feeling, it all just gets mushed into this rush of feelings. And it's hard to untangle what I'm actually feeling at a given time and what is happening at that time. So I decided I was going to give it, I gave it nearly a couple of years, and I was going to just see how it felt and really track things week by week and see if I could come back to feeling the way I felt before my mom's caregiving, or if it was time for me to explore something else.
How did you, I call it checking in, but how did you do that? Like, how did you measure it? Was it just a check-in of how you were feeling like at the end of the week? Like, how did that week go? What were some questions that you asked yourself to truly like measure this feeling of where you were going?
I created a list of questions for myself, and I did it weekly at the end of each week. And I think it was more, am I enjoying my time? Am I feeling purpose? Am I feeling I'm in service? Do I find this work interesting? So it was really just more asking me questions that I would want a mentor to ask me and that mentors do ask me, right? When I'm working with them. The whole concept in coaching, right, which I know because you're a coach, is that our job is truly just to be able to ask the right questions, right? That unlock whatever is inside the amazing, incredible individual that we're working with. Lawyers, in a sense, do the same thing. I mean, lawyers, of course, have knowledge of the law, but we have to know how to ask the right questions to be able to um, like find the important information to then put into whatever area of law we're practicing. And so I really just started asking myself these questions. I can tell you, I was asking myself the questions a little too frequently in the beginning. I knew things weren't right. I'd ask myself every day or after every project. And it was honestly causing anxiety, right? Just this building of like, no, this doesn't feel right. No, this doesn't feel right. And so it was actually my husband who's just an incredible support and um, a very steady person who said, why don't you try it weekly? And that way you don't have this building effect of like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, this doesn't feel right. And weekly really felt great. And I
Yeah.
wrote things down. That was the important thing too. Not just to think it in my head. I don't know about you, but sometimes I can think things. I'm like, oh yeah, like, but it's not the same as writing things down, right? Like I can half articulate a thought and it's like, okay, duh, and then it kind of fades away. But if I write it down, it's concrete. I've thought about it. This is a fully formed thought, and then it's somewhere that I can review it.
Yeah, and it's super important too. There's definitely power in writing it down. I know that we get in the habit of just thinking about it, and as long as like, oh, check, we thought about it. But it's different when it's kind of opening yourself up more and more is coming out when you write it out. But like you said, also to review it, right? Like you go a couple weeks and then you come back and review it. And, in a couple weeks, you're not even the same person that you were a couple weeks before, right? You're
Mm.
constantly changing and growing, and to look back and be like, okay, this many weeks was not, not so great. These were the weeks that were not so great. But just to try to review that and remind yourself, because maybe that week was really good, but you had 3 weeks that weren't, right? Just to take inventory, like you said, of what was really serving you and what felt really good.
Absolutely. And I'm gonna put a twist on this old proverb. I'm gonna put a twist and put it in the feminine, but it's no woman steps into the same river twice each day. New river, new woman.
Hmm. Yeah. Yes, it's so true. I mean, as long as you are not staying stuck and asking yourself questions and, even taking the steps when things are hard, right? Like earlier when you were saying, two-time caregiver and then going back into this role and then having to figure it out. You're still taking steps, but you're taking the steps and giving yourself time to do all of that as well as figure it out along the way and not being hard on yourself. Like I have heard you not say one thing about like being hard on yourself for what you're doing, more of like coming at it from curiosity and an open space of like, I want to figure this out and I'm going to figure this out. And it doesn't have to be right this second. I can take some time to really figure out what is true to me. And I think that that's super important. It doesn't have to be fast. Everything doesn't have to be like check, 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 check. It can be time and taking that time to really take the inventory, check in with yourself and know what to do that is right for you next. That's how you're going to know is by taking those times and
Oh,
reviewing that, right?
well, I appreciate you saying that. I can tell you that I fully accept what you've said now in terms of how I view it. In the moment, though, I want to be very honest that I was, without knowing it, I was very much in the victim mentality. It was like this happened. I was forced to, like, I like didn't have a choice, right? Because I didn't want my mom to be alone. So I went and then I came back and that didn't fit. And like, not a woe is me victim, but a I am not in control of my life victim. And I mean, I will say this as long as I can. The statistic to me, there are so many statistics out there on caregiving, and I'm really grateful for all of the incredible studies and the work that's being done behind the scenes to study caregiving and its effects on caregivers. I can tell you, though, Shauna, that the statistic that has stuck out to me as I've read all of these studies is that over 50% of caregivers feel they did not have a choice in caregiving. Over 50%. And to me, the reason why that's so important is because that, to me, after having lived this twice and been in this field for nearly 20 years, is the foundation for success or for feelings of failure when it comes to whatever comes next in caregiving, when it comes to the emotional health of the caregiver in caregiving and after caregiving ends. Like this is the thing that matters. And so one of my big goals is to ensure that women are empowered through education, through conversations, through confidence. They have the courage to do what they need to do for their family so that whenever, not if, I love that you said that, not if, but whenever caregiving comes, that they can be in the situation where they're making a decision to go into caregiving? Because I really feel like that's what sets women up for success.
Yeah, oh wow, I can totally see that. And, depending on what, you know, you go into it with, I don't have a choice. It's kind of like grumbly and resistant, and it's kind of like trudging through the mud in a situation that could already be very difficult as it is, right? Or you can be like, I am going to do this, and like, the other side of the coin, and your mindset is different going into it, which is going to make it easier, not easy, but easier with the mindset of the choice, right? Versus feeling like you're being like dragged through the mud, if you will.
Absolutely. And the one thing that I'm always telling my students and my clients is, so to me, it's the difference between whether or not you're a main character in your own story or you're a supporting character. If you feel, and I have felt this way, so there is no shame, there is no blame. I did not know I was in the victim mentality, but I have been. If you feel that way, then you become a supporting character in someone else's story. I became a supporting character in my mom's story. Now, why does that matter? That matters because supporting characters don't get to make decisions. Supporting characters are the one. Think of any rom-com that you love. You always have like the fun friend that's supporting, the female lead, and she just goes where the fun friend wants and supports her on her date and like flies with her to the wedding. But the supporting character doesn't get to make decisions, but the main character does. And so if you are the main character and you step into caregiving, you start it saying, I'm the main character in my own life. And my mom, she's the main character in her own life. And we have overlapping stories, but I'm not fully seeding my story to become a supporting character in hers. Then you get to make decisions like, do I go back and leave my job for an entire year? Like you make that decision, that agency, that deliberation, that consideration then gives you energy and doesn't take from you. You can make decisions like, do I pay X amount of dollars out of pocket for this medication that someone in my family needs, even though we have a family budget and normally those dollars go somewhere else? You get to make the decision of, do I ask these important health questions, the questions no one wants to talk about, when my family member is still able to answer them, has legal capacity, but also just has the ability to communicate with me about their wishes? Like you as a main character get to make those decisions about what you do or what you don't do. And the reason why, Shauna, at the end of the day, that's important is I've made so many mistakes in my life. Like I'm laughing because so many. The ones that are hardest to live with, though, are the ones that I feel like I just made because I was there and then the thing happened. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that stinks. That's terrible. That's horrific. That is devastating. The mistakes that I made where I said, I'm going to go left and I should have gone right. I'm like, okay, like, yeah, that wasn't great, but I can own that I made that mistake and I can learn from it. It's really hard to learn from things if you feel like you weren't at all a part of the decision making, but you just have to live with the consequences.
Hey there, do you need some more tools to help boost your week? I got you. I got you. Head on over to www.igniteddecisions.com, and there is 4 different resources that you can use to help clear your mind, get things done, checking in, 10 ways to better your day, and to be able to plan more me time. Yes, plan more me time. Head on over to www.igniteddecisions.com to get your freebies today to help boost your week. Wow, that's so awesome that you say it like that. I love how that was such a good picture, like to paint with the main character and how to make decisions. And one of the things that really stuck out for me was the end of what you just said, but also when you said that when you are the main character and the person you are taking care of is also the main character and your stories overlap, you were talking about how it can give you energy to be able to make these decisions versus taking your energy and draining it. And I think that that is so huge because, like you said, stepping into your power, stepping into this role and being able to do that, you need to be fueled. You need to be fueled with your power to make all of these decisions for the exact reason that you just said at the end, right? The decisions that you made in order to own it and to know it and to learn versus just not learning and you're kind of like living in the denial process or the oh, I don't know, or the victim mentality and getting stuck there.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I love the way that you said that. That was so good. I was like, oh yes. All of it was so very well put and
Thank you. And I mean, but I have to say, I mean, I do believe this about caregiving, and because caregiving is, I say it's the hardest final exam that life will give you because it is with aging parents or with aging family members and friends and death. That's, I think, the hardest final exam that life gives you. I feel really passionate about that. Now, to be honest though, in my daily life, right? Like we could say, okay, well, let's be the main character always in our daily lives. And wouldn't that be great? Yeah, yeah, of course that would be great. Does that happen though? No. I mean, even just this week, for instance, my in-laws are going to come visit us this weekend, and I'm super excited. And I could just sit down and say, okay, well, I'm going to make a schedule of the things I need to do to prepare beforehand, and it wouldn't be that hard, but it's just so much easier to be like, "Whoa, I'm getting pulled this way, and then I'm going to try to do this, and now I'm getting pulled this way, and okay, I'll just try to make sure that we have food for our guests by the time they come." Like it feels sometimes just easier to do that. So I totally get anybody who's like, "Oh man, I love the idea of being the main character," but that takes a lot of energy. I get that because in my own life, sometimes like, yeah, oh, I can't figure it out. So I'm just gonna go this way and that way, you know?
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's for sure a thing. I know, like for example, we just went on a vacation and when we woke up the next day we were like we needed like a vacation day from our vacation day. And there was all these things that needed to be done and I was just like, "Oh my goodness," because it was so much easier for me to be like, "What? Not doing it, I'm just not going to do all the things." But what I did was I chose, made a decision to do two things that needed to be done and then being okay with allowing myself to rest and do the rest, right? So it's like I don't get to just give up everything, even though it is hard. But okay, so then what? Like backing that up a little bit and being like, okay, what are the two things that I'm willing to do that need to be done? And then after that, it'll be fine. And almost like giving myself grace for the rest of it. So it's something that I've had to practice just because the easy way is to be like, nope. But then you're also it's gonna come back around where you're gonna be like, well, now I have more stuff. Now you
But
have
did,
more
did
stuff.
but didn't I mean I love well, thank you for sharing that. And that's actually a great framework. Just like I'm gonna prioritize and then these two things and everything else, just peace. I'm cool with it. But I mean, I'm assuming and I'm hoping that you just felt less anxiety about your list, right?
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
prioritized. Here are the two things, and I do have to say, so we live in New York City, which we just feel so grateful to be here. And so thankfully we have just an abundance of food options. I mean, everything is always sort of here. So I don't have to worry about that. But when guests are coming, the two biggest things that I feel like we have to have in actually, can you guess? Can you
Food.
guess? I
Having food.
mean, it's coffee and toilet paper. I feel
Oh,
like
you're
as
so funny.
long as we have those two things, coffee in the mornings and enough toilet paper, like everything else we can figure out, if push comes to shove.
I think that's great. I think that's great. Everybody will be happy in the morning, and then you're not running out of an essential thing that you don't want to run out of. I
Yeah.
think that's great. I love it. I love it. Toilet paper and coffee. I'm going to take note of that for future reference. Oh, I love it. So I wanted to ask you more about, you know, you're very passionate about helping others with caregiving. Can you give me kind of like how you help people, how you can, start them on this journey of either being prepared for it, or if maybe that's already happened for them and they don't really know, what to do next? Can you give us some?
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, that's such a generous question. Thank you so much, Shauna. So I just want to frame this by saying I always like to work and to be able to touch people before the caregiving experience, right? Because in the most ideal world we could ever imagine, we get to make these decisions and have conversations and do deep thinking when there's not a health crisis. So that's one of the reasons where I'm just constantly trying to move this caregiving discussion upstream. With that said, I also work with people who are in caregiving, who are in either the health crisis of caregiving immediately or who are in the after effects of it. Health crisis has occurred, and now as a family, they're figuring out what their everyday life is going to look like. And so everyone is welcome at the Cozy Caregiver Cafe, which is just this virtual sort of fictional entity that I've created, which I really want caregivers to feel like when they're entering the Cozy Caregiver Cafe as a digital space, that they have a space to dream, they have a place to solve problems, and there's a path, there's a framework for how they can ultimately find peace with whatever is going on in their lives. And so, what I offer is I have a digital course, which is called How Your Family Wins in Caregiving. And what that does is it walks people through the main pillars that almost every single caregiving issue that you could imagine falls into. And so, although families are unique and people are unique, and there are certainly dynamics which I probably can't even imagine that may be happening in your family, when it comes to caregiving, when it comes to where the rubber meets the road, there are really only a handful of pillars that any of these issues are ultimately going to sift down into. And I found that when women understand, they have a foundational knowledge of understanding about those pillars, then they just feel much more prepared and at ease and confident to be able to solve whatever problem comes their way. So, for instance, if somebody I mean, what the big issue that comes up is health, right? And so if somebody knows, like, oh, in my state, these are actually what the documents are called that allow an agent to make healthcare decisions for somebody else. And here are the circumstances that are either laid out in state law or that exist within the confines and the writing of the document that explain when that agent will be able to make decisions for someone else should they become incapacitated, then like I understand when someone's throwing these terms around, I don't have to be like, oh, yeah, you understand what they are. And as a result, that confidence provides people with the courage to then have conversations and say, hey, mom, do you have a healthcare proxy? That's the document that, should you become incapacitated, would allow an agent to make healthcare decisions for you. Oh, you have one. That's great. Where is it? Is it, does your doctor know about it? Who's named as the agent? Am I named as the agent? That's great to know. If I'm named as the agent, is it okay if at some point, it doesn't have to be now, but when you're ready, we talk about this? Because if I'm your agent, I want to be best representing you and your wishes, should I ever be called to step into this role. And that means I really need to understand what your wishes are. And so I have found, particularly daughters are often named as agents, right, for making healthcare decisions. And they want to be that person. They want to say, yes, mom would want this. And so mom is, not able to make decisions for herself. And I know mom would want this. And so because now I have legal power to make these decisions, this is what I'm going to do. But to get there, you have to have this solid foundation and framework for understanding things. And so, what the course does is it essentially walks people through that legal education and ways that, if it's state specific law, ways they can go and look and find and learn about what specifically is happening in their state, and then how to translate that into the questions that every single woman should ask any person in her life that she may become a caregiver for. Any single, like this should be happening across the country in every single household. But I found that those questions we just went through, Shauna, they can be pretty intense, right? And so the way I say, like, these are the core questions, But maybe we make the conversation a bit easier by asking what I call constellation questions, which are family story questions that align, if we're talking about health, with health, but are softer and are better. And instead of like, let's talk about your incapacity and death, they're tell me about your favorite moments doing X, or tell me when you were most joyful about Y. I found, Shauna, that when people are given the opportunity to talk about the best times in their life, then they're much more open to talking about some of the hardest times, not only that have happened, but that are to come. And so there's a whole framing for how these conversations can not only occur because they're necessary, but become beacons for caregiving. Because the more you know about your mom, even in stories that just seem so far-fetched, like how could this relate to caregiving? I promise you, the better you'll be able to serve her in caregiving and beyond when you're called into that role.
I love that. I love that because I think you're right. Those are difficult conversations, and it's you probably find that people are like, "Oh, I don't need to have those right now." Like it's something that gets put off or something that gets avoided just because one, they are difficult, difficult conversations. And two, people don't want to think about that. They don't want to think about, it's funny as humans, we talk about our lives and what we're doing and like maybe, the birth and all of that, but it's very avoidant on the end and everyone is going to pass away. Like that is the thing. But we try to like avoid it. And then if there's a path that may be difficult or something happens, like you said, with all of that, it's like we don't prepare. Like we prepare for everything. Why would we not prepare for this? You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
it's so interesting to me how it's like if we don't talk about it, it's not going to happen. It's like,
Hmm.
but it is, right? So it's like, how can we best, like you said, how can we best be prepared for these situations? And I love that you frame out like how to have these conversations to make them easier because I think that's just going to take so much pressure and anxiety and overwhelm off of that situation to have those conversations so you can be prepared.
Hmm.
So I think that that's amazing and great because I think
Uh,
people
so this might sound a little strange, but well, not this part. So what I'm going to say is I have this new question that I ask myself, and it is, how can I make this, whatever I'm doing, more fun for me? That's my question. It's not because I'm constantly thinking about how to make it more fun for my mom and for my son and for my husband. But my new question is, how can I make this more fun for me? Because I know that honestly, if it's fun for me, that I will then bring the energy that just regardless sort of what's happening, whether we're stuck in an airport because we have a delayed flight or we're doing something as a family that's a really exciting activity. I know that it's going to be more fun for everybody else if I am in good energy, right? So my new question is, how can I make this more fun for me? And then today at the playground this morning with my son, who's almost 3, and we were playing with bubbles. And he has one of those big, long bubble wands where you just wave it once and all these bubbles go into the air. And it just made me so joyful that I kid you not, Sean, I said, I don't think people can see bubbles and not be somewhat joyful, like not be somewhat happy. It like tweaked this sort of silly muscle, the silly bone in you. And so I said, I just in that moment thought, whenever my funeral is, I mean, I'm 38, so I hope it's a long ways away, but whenever my funeral is, I want there to be bubbles. I want that to be a part of it because I think that even if people are sad, because we never know when we're going to die, right? Even if people are sad, the bubbles will just be this silliness. And that's one of the things that in my family and my community, the playfulness that I hope I'm remembered for. So that's what I want to send people off.
I love that. I love that. That is so great. And I love how it came to you as well. Like, how you just the scenario and situation and how you described it with to like, what did you say? Tweak the silly bone or the silly muscle. I love that. And it's so true. I was thinking about that when you said that. I'm like, I don't think people could not be happy. Like one of those things or like, sometimes balloons are like the same. I don't know. I think that that's awesome. having.
And so I should say that and part of what I do as I in addition to the course I have a membership and I just my lawyer sort of brain is kicking in here. I should say that when you have a good idea like that, um, just thinking it is not enough. Like you have to take the steps to make sure that you document it somewhere. Sometimes it's legal documentation, sometimes it's not. It, I would want to share the story of how it came about, right? So it's not just like a line item in Allison's funeral have bubbles at the end, right? Like you'd
Yeah.
want a story. And so you want to make sure you're capturing that. So one of the things that happens a lot is that people have these great ideas, but then they don't necessarily know how to like make sure that these ideas are translated. And so in my membership, which is where I work with family caregivers, women specifically to help build and grow their dreams during caregiving and then help provide caregiving support. This is an example of something where someone came to me and said, Allison, I want bubbles at I almost said wedding. Isn't it funny we say wedding and funeral? I want bubbles at my funeral. It's like we could workshop and talk through the steps that could be taken for how to do that.
That's awesome. That is awesome. So, so what I'm hearing you say is you have a membership, you have a digital space where people can come and it's like a community for it's called, can you say the name again?
Sure. The Cozy Caregiver Cafe. So the Cozy Caregiver Cafe exists on Instagram and Facebook. Of course, it's completely free. There's a podcast, The Cozy Caregiver Cafe, where I get to talk to family caregivers and coaches. And I also talk to my mom, and we have mother-daughter conversations about caregiving and what that looks like. And then for people that are looking for women that are really looking for more a more like fulsome approach of how they can protect their families and how they can lead their families during difficult times. That's where you have the online course and the membership.
I love all of that. And I will have all of those, I will have all of that information in the show notes so anybody can find Allison if they want to reach out. I have just a couple more questions for you. So during the time when you are a caregiver and you were feeling like things were pretty intense and that they were hard, how did you or did you make time for yourself? How did you
Oh, yeah.
make sure that you could fill yourself up in some way so you could show up to be that caregiver?
Mm. It's a great question. And I would do things now for myself, and I have done things in caregiving for my mom just as she ages. But the reason why it's self-care and the dreaming component and the continued independent growth of caregivers is so important to me is that I just didn't do that. I didn't do it during my periods caregiving, and um, I feel like I am so passionate about working with women, and I've spoken openly about this, and I hope this isn't too much, is because I found that during that period after my mom had survived cancer, I had returned to work. Work wasn't fitting. I was just exhausted, like nothing left to give, nothing, just nothing. Um, that I had suicidal ideations. I just like I couldn't take another blow in my life. And I was so exhausted and tired. I hadn't given myself time to heal. I hadn't given myself rest during caregiving that I just was like, I just can't. I just can't anymore. And I'm really thankful that it only lasted a short period and that through, love and support and help, I was able to heal from that. But it remains very close to my heart and the urgency for why I feel that women, like over 50% of caregivers, feel like they didn't have a choice. The reason why that's so urgent to me is because I know on the back end, when you're a former caregiver, what that can lead to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. So when this component that you have, is that included in your program and in the digital space? Do you kind of divide it up and give it in both spaces?
So the digital course, the How Your Family Wins in Caregiving course, which is the holistic course that walks people through all the pillars of caregiving, that exists as an online course itself for people that just want to say, I just want to do this. I want to get it done. But people also can have access to it through the membership. And in the membership, it's a bit the content is the same, but the delivery is a bit softer. Basically, you have a lesson that's delivered every other month. So, what that means is that busy mamas that have so much on their plates have 2 months to listen to about an hour-long training and work on the exercises, schedule a call with their family member, hold the call and ask questions, and then come to the live office hours that I offer, or email my support team for when they have questions about what comes up when they talk to their parents.
Okay. And this aspect of mindset and doing things for yourself to, like you were saying, the dream to be following your dreams and taking care of themselves, those are both in both spaces as well, correct?
That's truly in the membership space. The self-care portion of it, the self-care of how do you care for yourself, there's a part of that that's in the digital course because it's so important to me. But what's so neat, Shauna, and I imagine that you do this in coaching too, is that in the membership, I'm not just saying, hey, what are your dreams? What are your goals? We're actively working on them every week, and we're setting new goals for how things can work. And if we don't hit our goals, we say, hey, it's not like, oh man, this was a bad week. Because look, you are actually, regardless of this, maybe terrible health news you received in your family or this intense stress that you felt, you still have this dream or this, and that we were able to break down into goals, and you still walked forward towards it. And if it means that maybe we were a bit too ambitious this week, what we can do is we can roll those to the next week. We can prioritize exactly what you said that you did so naturally after your family came home from vacation. We can say, what needs to happen next? What's really going to move the needle forward? But I love doing it with working with family caregivers because I know that their lives are so erratic and unpredictable at times that just them having something for themselves. And I do it in a way that allows them to work in the middle of the night, that allows them, to work in between meetings or in between doctor's appointments. So it's just my true joy. I love it so much.
I can tell you get so lit up when you talk about it and just how you can help and what you have to offer, I think is amazing and I think it's much needed. So
Thank you.
I'm so happy that you are doing this.
Thank you.
I always like to ask all of my guests that are on the show what their superpower is and if they would like to share it with the listeners.
Oh my goodness. Well, I love that question. I want to pause for a second and say that this has been such a great conversation. I've really enjoyed it. And so I hope that among your superpowers, Shauna, you feel like it's putting people at ease and asking wonderful questions and being to host digital conversations in a meaningful way, because I absolutely feel that from you. So I hope that you feel like that's one of your superpowers.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
When it comes to my superpowers, um, I mean, there sort of two things come to mind. One, I would say, from a legal and consulting mind, I am able I am able to spend a short amount of time with somebody. I call it my caregiving vulnerability assessment. And just by asking, like we talked about, the right questions, be able to sort of immediately tell them what the main pain points are going to be in their caregiving experience. Can I predict everything? No. Can I predict other things about the future? Absolutely not. But there are some tried and true paths and information that when someone says it, I'm like, oh my, I know that this is going to be the challenge. And I just want to make sure that you know it too, not so that you can feel anxious about it, but like you said, so that you can make it easier. Not easy, but easier. And
Mhm.
then I would say my personal superpower is I truly love to host people in my heart. I want people, and maybe this is just maybe I'm hoping this is my superpower. I want people when they spend time with me through in-person conversations or through a digital conversation, I want them to feel like they have a home in me. They have a listener in me, someone who truly cares. I am not a great host in my home. I think we've covered that. If you're coming to my home, I'll make sure I have coffee and toilet paper. Like everything else, sorry, I'm not sure. But I truly value greatly and put a lot of attention on hosting people in my heart.
I love that. I love that. That is so great. Thank you for sharing that. That's a good one.
Well,
Well,
thank you.
I loved our conversation today, and I think there was so much value and help to put people at ease when they listen to this and know that there's something that they can do and know that there's a place they can go and a wonderful person that they can also speak with. I think that this show has been very helpful, and I loved our conversation. Thank you for being here today.
Oh, thank you so much, Shauna. Bye.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed the conversation, learned something new, or got some gems to take away that will boost your week. I release a new episode each week, so make sure to click that follow button to not miss what is coming next. If you love the show or want to share a story, send me a quick message. I love hearing from listeners. If you know someone who needs this episode in their life, go ahead and share it with them. I'm sure they would love you for it. If you are looking to connect more, check out the show notes for all the social links, my website. I would love to hear how this episode helped you and what you loved about it. If there is a topic you want to hear about, send that too. All right, ladies, now is the time to release your inner power.